Okay, so Energy Transfer's out with a new project disclosed in their earnings call called Dakota Access North. They also made final investment decision on their Southern Illinois Connector project. We've done several videos on that, so I won't go into depth on that one. You can look back at the old videos if you want to, and maybe I'll put something in Plainview Weekly on that on this weekend's release. But I do want to go in depth on Dakota Access North, and our Energy Transfer says it's a project with Enbridge, up to 250,000 barrels a day of new Canadian egress pipeline space. So this is an interesting project. They didn't give too many details on it. I'm guessing that Enbridge gives more details on Friday during their earnings call. So we'll see what more details that they give. Plan to make FID mid 2026, they said. But we can jump in and kind of theorize and guess what this project may look like. We don't know for sure, but let's take a look and see what we can parse out from this. So probably good to bring on the Canadian Mainline here, since that's probably going to be the artery that's bringing these barrels down. Might as well bring on Lakehead too. Okay, so I think most people realize and assume correctly that generally speaking, this pipeline runs full. That's not exactly true anymore with Trans Mountain coming online. There is some space on this from month to month. But we're going to operate under the assumption that this is going to run full into the future. So kind of parsing out like what this project would look like and where there might be bottlenecks in Enbridge's Mainline and or Dakota Access and ETCOP. To kind of see where the capital needs to be spent, if capital needs to be spent on this project, where there's open capacity. Remember, the name of the game in midstream is filling up your underutilized assets. Energy Transfer has been trying to do that with Dakota Access and ETCOP for the past year or so. That's a wise thing to do, and that's what all these projects are about. So really quick, let's jump into the specifics behind the main line. So Enbridge discloses the capacity on the main line, and it may not be perfect, and they may give us just rough estimates, but they provide like a subway map of the system configuration of the main line on their website. So I'll just do a quick overview of that to kind of show where the bottlenecks may be and where there's open space possibly, so where capital does and does not need to be spent. So this is Hardisty here. So the pipeline gets a lot of capacity, or a lot of their supply, from Edmonton and Hardisty. Hardisty down to Cromer, which is this green dot here. Enbridge discloses that the mainline has a little bit over 3 million barrels a day of capacity between these 2 points. There's additional capacity once you pass Cromer into the U.S. It's about 3.2 million barrels a day. And something to keep in mind, when the pipeline runs full, and we'll make the judgment that this pipeline's running full into the future, that different parts of this segment here may be bottlenecked and different parts may have some open capacity. So thinking about a potential expansion project of 250,000 barrels a day, where does capital need to be deployed, or where do they have open capacity? This segment, generally speaking, is full, but there's parts of it that aren't. So this is Caribert here, and they do take in some additional supply at Caribert. I don't know how much. We can't actually, I've never seen disclosures of what actually flows at different segments of this pipeline. We have the flows at the border, we have the flows at some of the U.S. state borders, but never like the specific flows on the actual pipeline in Canada. But they do take some supply here. So if we're operating under the assumption that this whole segment is 3 million barrels a day, a little over 3 million barrels a day, that would imply that like there's some open space on this segment here, because if they're taking some barrels here, then and the capacity is the same throughout the whole pipe, that stands to reason that there'd be space behind that. At Regina, they take a little bit of capacity in too, but I believe they take more out. So there's 2 refineries here. It's about 150,000 barrels a day combined that take barrels off the main line. So net, I would guess, I don't know for sure, probably 100,000 barrels a day comes off the line here. I forgot to mention, it's probably a couple 100,000 barrels a day that goes on the line at Caribert. Again, that's an educated guess. I don't know for sure. So given the fact that there's barrels that come off the line at Regina, there's probably some open space here too. So if we're thinking about a project for more Canadian egress, and Enbridge has said talk of optimization projects. They've FID'd another 100,000 barrels a day of optimization. This would be another 250 on top of it. They may have to lay new pipe, especially in this bottlenecked area. I don't know for sure though. Maybe they can just expand these pipes. There's certainly several pipes here. This isn't just one pipe; it's several pipes. So perhaps you could just pump DRAs, do some pump stations, and just squeeze a little bit of capacity out of. I think there's five lines that are running this way, and I'm giving the combined capacity on all those lines. So it's possible they could squeeze more capacity out of that, but there is some potential open capacity on segments of this pipeline is, I guess, what I'd have to say. So I would guess there'd be a decent chunk of capital that needs to be spent here. Whether it's laying pipe or not, who knows? Maybe we'll get more answers from Enbridge on their earnings call. Again, I think it's Friday. Now let's talk about the DAPL part of this. So this is a project that DAPL says they're going to do with this main line. So as you can see, these two pipes do not connect, but there's some obvious places where they potentially could connect. And reading the tea leaves, the name of the project is Dakota Access North. So perhaps one of the ideas here is to build a segment up to Cromer, where they could pull barrels off of the main line. They could also go to Regina too. I think Cromer's a little bit closer here, so maybe that makes some more sense for them to do that. But Regina is certainly an option. An option that wouldn't require a new pipeline to be built. It's possible. I think it's a little less likely just because there's not a lot of capacity. But Enbridge has their Bakken pipeline, so I'll just layer that on quick. And they have their North Dakota line that connects these two, so they wouldn't even have to lay pipe here. There's excess space on that. This is flowing barrels north. It is underutilized. It's about 150,000 barrels a day of light, so it couldn't take that much heavy. But they could reverse this, and they could bring this down. That's one possibility. I think the next possibility is less likely, but they could utilize Plains' pipeline, the Wascana pipeline, and then their Montana pipeline. Their Plains Pipeline Montana. That does directly connect into DAPL, it appears. So that's an option. This does flow south. This is bidirectional. It doesn't have a lot of capacity flowing south, but this is another option. And it's not a large diameter pipeline, so you couldn't bring a ton down here. I think it's less than 100,000 barrels a day. So that's an option too. I think it's probably more likely. Let me just clear this off again, and I'll bring the main line back and DAPL back. I think it's more likely that we see a new pipeline get laid, given the name of the pipe. The name of this is Dakota Access North. Maybe they build a segment north up into Cromer. So that's a possibility. So kind of the route that I think most of you can kind of figure out the route that we're looking at here is going to be, just draw it. So down here, come over here, down to here, and then you're going to go into ETCOP and then into the Gulf. So let me just clear this out again. We'll zoom out quick. Give a little bit of a bigger picture. All right, so something like this. Down to the Gulf. So again, potentially some expansion of the main line up here, potentially some new pipeline being laid, not really sure. Potentially some new pipeline being laid here. The good thing about this project is Dakota Access. Once you hit Dakota Access, you actually have quite a bit of empty space on that pipeline and at COP as well. So let's just look at that really quick. Again, one of the most economic things you can do in midstream is fill up your underutilized assets. So they mentioned it during their call. They have over 200,000 barrels a day of space on this pipeline that's open. So you see that here. This is light capacity. So if you're doing heavy, they may have to batch this. They may have to invest in more storage terminals to be able to do that batching. So there is some capital outlay probably for a project like this. They may have to expand DAPL a little bit if they went the full 250. Again, your capacity on light is different than your capacity on heavy. So it's possible they would want to expand that pipeline a little bit there, and it is expandable up to over 1 million. It is permitted for over 1 million in most states, I believe. And then ETCOP has quite a bit of capacity on it here, so another pipeline that can be expanded. It may even be over 470. I think Enbridge discloses 470 on this one, but I think it can be expanded as well if need be. So I guess the last point on this is to think about tariff rates. Kind of the pipeline that Enbridge has used over the past few years to do these egress projects has been their Mainline and then Flanagan South, which takes a route down Seaway. So the joint tariff on that to get from Edmonton down to the Gulf Coast, Houston area was, depending on when you signed up, $8 to $9 a barrel is kind of what that runs right now. The tariff price on DAPL, we can just look really quick for the lights. Let's do down to Nederland and let's do that. So you're a little shy of $7. So it's a doable project. I don't know if you're going to be competing with the $8 to $9 that the Mainline plus Flanagan South plus Seaway get you. But that's full now, so that's why they're not doing that project. So I would guess this would be probably closer to the $9 to $10 range. But they could discount Dakota Access. They could discount this down to Dakota Access. Again, they might have most favored nations clauses on some of their contracts, but we'll see. I think it's a competitive project. I think it's a good project. I know Plains mentioned during their call about their Capline pipeline being open. That's a great asset to have that's open, but it's all the way down in Patoka, and getting the barrels to Patoka without a line like DAPL is probably an issue. So having a pipe in the ground like DAPL with open capacity and ETCOP all the way down to the Gulf Coast, that's gonna win the day. Unless there's another pipeline I'm not thinking of that Plains or their partners could use to get down to the Patoka area. So good project. I think this probably makes a lot of sense. The capital outlay is kind of a question mark. We'll see how much batching they have to do, how much of the expansion of the Mainline they'll have to do, but maybe we'll get some more information on Friday. Been busy with earnings. Please reach out to us if you have any questions. We have some exciting new stuff with the platform coming out. This is the beta version. The 1.0 version will be out in a couple weeks. So yeah, reach out. Let us know if you want to test drive or if you have any questions. Everybody have a great week. Thanks for listening.